video is brought to you by Vita Bee Health. Thanks Vita for sponsoring this channel. Please check them out, link in the description of this video. In today's podcast, I have the pleasure to speak to Curtis Mraz. Curtis is the fourth generation beekeeper in his family, following the legacy of the legendary Charles Mraz. We talked about Curtis' career, leading now the Champlain Valley's Apiaries, his decision-making process to become the fourth generation beekeeper in his family, his views about the future of the beekeeping industry, pesticides, the Vermont bill reducing the use of neonicotinoids, and other topics. And now I introduce to you Mr. Curtis Mraz. Hey Curtis, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm glad to get to sit down and make it happen.
Yeah, I don't know if the people at home know a little bit of the background of this. I visit you guys for video work. Let me put your website here. You guys upload the website. Oh, wait, 1 second. And the website become very cool looking. Now I wanna share here. Let me see.
Yeah, so I hail from Champlain Valley, Apiaries, and we're based in Middlebury, Vermont. And like Umberto is saying, we just launched a new website.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about all of that. I just want to keep this running in the background, just for the people to have a vibe about your operation. And Curtis Mraz, you are the fourth generation of a family of beekeeper. Is a legacy. You're getting the legacy of your grandfather Charles Mraz. Every place I go and I talk with the old generation of people, I cannot have someone that get more, that the people get more excited to talk about. They have so much respect for your grandfather and everything he has done to the beekeeping in the United States, that I said, oh my God, I need to learn more about this. Guys, I got excited when I talked to these people. I said, I need to bring Curtis. He's getting fourth generation. What's coming? So here we are. You are the new generation. Tell me a little bit about you, how you grown up in this beekeeping legacy family. Tell me a little bit of your story.
Yeah, thanks, Umberto, and thanks for giving a shout out to Charlie. Went by Charles Mraz, but a lot of old beekeepers and his friends and other farmers called him Charlie. So as you mentioned, I'm a fourth generation beekeeper. I grew up in New Hampshire, but I spent every summer since I was a kid in Vermont working with my family's bees. Oftentimes I'd leave right after school got out and spend the summers living with my grandparents, my grandfather who was running the bee business at the time, and working in the bee yards, being, minimally helpful, but getting out there and getting stung and eating lots of comb honey for sure. So, when I was young, I didn't love beekeeping. It was quite a burden, and, like any chore, it was forced upon us. And I grew into the labor of love of it. And it wasn't until after college, when I got a degree in biology, that I realized how significant bees were in our ecosystem and how much of a responsibility I had to upkeep this legacy and do this work and advocate on behalf of the bees, as my family has done for so long. And so after college, I got engaged in beekeeping. I started working much more intentionally with my family's operation, taking trips to Vermont consistently and learning about the ins and outs of the operation and also ways that I could improve it down the road.
Very cool. So we have similar stories then, because when I was younger, I didn't like it either. I was a kind of free labor for my dad for a long time. And he always pushed me all the time. I didn't like it. But the trigger came after, to when I have the full understanding about the importance. And yeah, it's interesting that we have a similar story.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a labor of love for sure.
Yes. So I want to start from the beginning with your grandfather. Can you tell us a little bit of your Charles Mraz? Directly from the source, because what a guy!
What a guy! So I never actually knew Charlie very long. He passed away when I was a pretty young kid. I do have a number of years in which I, remember meeting him and sitting on his lap as a kid, but I've heard stories and stories, and I feel like he was one of my best friends, even though we lived generations apart. He was from Queens, New York, originally, son of Czech immigrants, and his neighbor had kept bees for a long time. And when Charlie was a teenager, he would go over and kind of peek over his neighbor's fence and spy on him as he was taking care of his bees out of curiosity. And his neighbor caught him a couple times, invited him to start helping, and Charles got really interested in bees and really passionate about bees. And I think he was the type of person that, once he found what he was passionate about, and I'm very similar, the drive becomes instinctual, and it's just like the mission is outlined very clearly. And once he had interactions with bees, his pursuit of happiness was very defined. Charles was going to become a beekeeper. So not long after that, he started working for a commercial beekeeper up in Vermont. And he bought an operation off of J. Crane, which was based in Middlebury. And in the 30s, he moved to Vermont and started running the bee business full time. So about 5 or 10 years after that, he built a honey shop in Middlebury, which at its time was really state of the art. 3 levels, everything gravity fed, very few motors throughout the entire honey shop. Charles was an engineer. He was also a scientist and a writer. I mean, since he was in his mid-20s, he was writing articles for the American Bee Journal and other scientific articles and publications. He was corresponding via letter to all sorts of beekeepers all over the world, sending letters. And not only beekeepers, but farmers as well. He, was an advocate for organic farming practices since early on in his days, before organic farming was even really a term that we were familiar with.
Cool. Yeah, I for example, I do have it. These publications that give me a lot of ideas. About how bees can help with the health of people. I just finished the reading of the book and give me together with this reading, and I'll leave a link in the description how you can get the book. And for full disclosure, no sponsorship. It's just me. I just like it. I just like to read about it. So I got inspired by a lot of things that he said here in this book about potential ways to help with bees, sting, and apitherapy, together with the information I got in my conversation with the older generation of beekeepers in the United States. I got so curious about your grandfather that I'm really considering to make a video series about him. There is so much, and I was just putting together how can I do that. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm gonna need a whole team of people to put a video series together." But let's see if it's gonna happen. So
yeah, I mean, so apitherapy was one of his huge passions as a beekeeper. I mean, he was really revolutionary in the field, and apitherapy is what it sounds like. It's similar to acupuncture, but instead of using needles, people use bee stings. And the idea is that there's certain biological compounds in the bee venom that are really beneficial to our health as humans. And Charles treated all sorts of diseases. People would travel from all over New England, old dairy farmers and women who dealt with all different sorts of health issues, mental and physical. And, Charles would treat them with a number of different bee stings and teach them how to treat themselves. That was another thing he was very, passionate about, is educating people how to be self-sufficient. And that's largely what this book, The Health of the Honeybee, is about, is his practice and experience with bee venom therapy.
Yeah, it is a very interesting book. I recommend the people to read it. Curtis, okay, so now how was the decision process for you to take the legacy? And now you're the 4th generation, young generation, and the future of beekeeping is a little weird right now, I would say. From my conversation with other families with legacies, I see a lot of people dropping. They're not continuing. So when you decide to continue, So can you give me a little bit about the thinking process, how you see the beekeeping work right now? Why did you decide to, keep doing it? That's what you're going to do, especially, and we're going to talk about beekeeping practice a little bit because you still keeping the old style, you don't put anything pallets. So give me a little overview about the thinking process, how you get there, and what's your motivation to keep moving.
Yeah, so I mean, you're totally right. The future of beekeeping is precarious, and it's not an easy decision to want to do this. To know the obstacles that lie ahead very clearly, and also not know a lot of the obstacles, and say, this is my future. I tell people often that I was beekeeping in the Hudson Valley in New York for a long time, running my own beekeeping business. Prior to working with my families, but I'd still come up to Vermont often to help my family in the day-to-day kind of beekeeping operations. And traveling between the Hudson Valley and Vermont, you drive along a rich agricultural corridor of New England. And, what you see is barn after barn that's falling in on itself, and farms that are for sale and foreclosed on, and concrete slabs that are overgrown with weeds. And it's like staring your future in the face, right? Like this is the trend of agriculture, that family farms are going out of style, that bees are consistently dying, and it's becoming harder and harder to keep them alive. But the reality is that like my family has been in this practice for 4 generations, and we know what beekeeping should be like. We know what it's like to keep bees without the pressures of agrochemical exposure, etc. And, with hay fields that are rich in clover and dandelions and not cut every 7 days. And those perspectives are few and far between these days, because oftentimes we have beekeepers, which, in all respect are 2 generations, which is phenomenal, but they don't have the kind of scope that we have as a, almost 100-year-old business of like, these are healthy bees. And these that we're dealing with now are unhealthy. And, I feel a responsibility to help communicate that and to help advocate for the health of the honeybees.
Wow. You're a brave man.
Brave or stupid. That's the other thing. They say it's like a bad drug, beekeeping. You get one good honey crop, and it's enough, it's 1 every 5 or 10 years, but it's enough to convince you to stay in the institute next.
Oh, that's the, I don't even know what to say, it's brave, and I'm proud of you, to be honest. I'm really proud of you, and very likely I would do the same, in your shoes. I learned here. I never had the experience myself to know what a healthy bee is really, but I talk with a lot of old folks here in the United States in my consulting business, and I hear the story all the time. Before this time, we had the problems they had is too many bees. Oh my God, we have too many bees. What are we gonna do with this? This is too much, And that's what I heard several times from many guys. And in my calculation, and I know that I'm a only guy, and I'm talking about this before anybody else on the internet. I think the agrochemicals have a huge impact on that people don't want to talk about it for many reasons. And after many years in academia and in the industry, I have to say that I see there is a on purpose suppression of this talk, and I kind of refuse to not talk about it.
I mean,
this up with you, so
yeah, I clearly have something to say. So, I mean, agrochemicals is undoubtedly the biggest problem that we're facing with bees, and our perspective is really illuminating. Right? Like, we've kept bees the same way for 100 years. And that means like putting them in place, leaving them in place all year, and letting them forage off of the 3 miles of, variable wildflowers and clover and whatnot that are available to them. A lot of beekeepers nowadays have adapted to our current agricultural system, which is monocropped, right, and largely dependent on debt-financed and chemical agriculture. So that means that we have crops like almonds or cranberries that are grown with only crops like almonds or cranberries. There's no other biodiversity in the scene. Those crops depend on bees for pollination. So we're in a system where we have to bring bees in to these crops to pollinate them. But as soon as the flower is out of bloom, it's the blueberries are done blooming or the cranberries are done blooming, there's no more food available for those bees there. So we have to pick them up and move them somewhere else. And, you know, when you're adding all those factors of putting bees on trucks and taking them off of trucks and exposing them to this crop and then that crop, and therefore those chemicals and these chemicals, it's really hard to put like a finger on what's actually causing their demise, right? And then here we are in the Champlain Valley of Vermont with our bees that have been here for 100 years in the same place. Some of the bee yards, literally the same place. It's really hard to, like, you know, add all those factors in. And you can see, like, okay, well, what has changed about the valley? Well, the hundreds of acres of hayfields that used to be around this bee yard are now corn and soybean, and they're being planted with seeds that are covered in neonicotinoids. And, you know, it becomes more and more obvious to us because of our perspective and the way that we be kept for so long. And, you know, a lot of commercial guys like laugh at the way we do it because they call it the Armstrong method, right? Which maybe sounds like a person, but it actually means that we pick up boxes with our arms and put them down somewhere else, and we have very strong arms because of it. Whereas a lot of people are picking things up with forklifts and moving them around. But this is a slower, more intentional. Yeah, we're not, you know, running 2 or 3 or 10,000 colonies. We're running 1,000, and we're doing it. We're doing the work intentionally. And this isn't to shame like other beekeepers the way that they beekeep, right? Because we've adapted to the systems that we live in order to survive and keep farming. And this is the system that's really worked for us here in Vermont. So
I'm sure you heard that before, but I have to ask that because you probably hear that. What about Varroa then? And it's, you know, Varroa is might be the main cause of this whole thing. There is a lot of talk about Varroa, and I understand the huge impact of that parasite has, and I call that one of the biggest enemy of honeybees. That for sure, and I keep stating that. However, as a scientist, I cannot say for sure which one is the bigger. If it's Varroa or if the chemicals. One we can measure, the other one we cannot. So as a scientist, to be completely open-minded, I don't feel comfortable to say that, you know, to put all of the attention that people are putting right now on Varroa and just this little attention or zero in something that is happening that not only affect the bees, but affect the water that my children drink, you know? So I'm going to keep opening my mouth, and I want to get, you know, what do you think about this Varroa thing and all this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, Varroa are real, right? There's no denying it. They're in all of our bee colonies, and these pests are causing real pressures on honeybees. But, you know, I like to compare this. I have a kind of silly, like, zombie apocalypse analogy, right? So we're in the apocalypse, and we can either run from the zombies, which are the mites, or in the case of, like, using all these pesticides, we're having our knees broken, and we can no longer run from the zombies, aka the mites. You know, we've created this situation where honeybees could escape the pressures of the mites if they were relieved of the agricultural chemicals that are preventing them from being able to evolve out of this issue, right? These are insects that have, like, this huge biological potential to evolve and solve their own issues because the queen lays 2,000 eggs a day, right? And they can replace the queen if she's not working, and they can adapt genetically to these kinds of situations. And we've seen it in the past. We had tracheal mites show up, right? And in large part, we weren't under the same agricultural chemical pressures that we are now. And the bees largely solved tracheal mite on their own, you know? But here we're dealing with this issue where when Varroa mites first came into the scene, people said, okay, if you have 20 Varroa mites per 100 bees you need to treat. And then the next year, okay, if you have 15 varroa mites per 100 bees you need to treat. And the threshold just keeps coming down and down and down, because guess what? It's not that the varroa mites are getting stronger, it's because the bees are getting weak. And they're more and more.
And I just want to let the people know that not only tracheomites, we have a real example with varroa mites. Like the Asian honeybees already developed a defense mechanism against varroa mite itself. So we know it happens if we let the bees alone or giving the amount of time and opportunity.
And that's one of the biggest issues, Umberto, with this colony loss is not the fact that we're losing 50% of our bees every winter, but that we're losing 50% of our genetics, right? Because these are bees that we've raised over 100 years in Vermont to become resistant to certain pressures that are only seen in Vermont. And when you add all this chemicals to the equation, you're disabling the bees to really be able to solve the issue.
It is much, much harder to select different genetics with that amount of pressure of the agrochemical. No doubt about it. That's why you do see a lot of people failing all the time trying to all those programs of, breeding programs. It's much harder to breed bees and to go to a direction because you cannot breed for everything, and the chemicals are attacking every part, every aspect of the bee biology. So you can't breed for everything. And that's why we're stuck. That's the way I feel. That's the way I think. And I think that we have the data already. And I'm showing in my videos a lot of the data. And I think that's the perfect hook for what I want to talk more right now, because I'm following Vermont after being in contact with you guys now. And after this video production we did together and understand more about your operation, yours, and the principles and values and the moral scope. And I start to follow Vermont. And now you guys in Vermont just passed a very important bill to reduce the use of neonicotinoids. And I was shocked. I saw that happening in New York. I knew something was going on with Vermont. But then I heard that the government veto. I said, oh, here we go again. And now there was can you tell us about this story, about the bill and how this came out? Because I don't have all the details.
Yeah, this has been a long process. I think to a lot of people that, have been watching it from the sidelines, it showed up in the news and then the bill passed and great. But the reality is that beekeepers have been fighting neonics on the front lines for like almost 20 years now.
20 years, yeah.
And in Vermont, it's been a very disorganized process, I'd say, up until these last couple of years. I mean, the reality is that the onus of this issue is falling on the beekeepers, right? It's like we are the ones that are seeing it firsthand in our colony losses. And it's indicative of what's happening on a larger scale to birds and to native bees and other, species that we're not having daily interactions with. But economically, beekeepers are feeling these hits, right? And then we're the ones that are saying, hey, there's a real issue here that we need to figure out what's causing this issue. And it's the onus has been put on the beekeepers to do the science and prove, well, in fact, neonicotinoids are causing a problem. And so that's why I say that the road has been so long. Like, the science has been around for a long time, almost as long as neonics, if not just as long, saying these are not healthy. We should not be using these. They kill bugs other than their target, insects. And they're super harmful to bees and potentially harmful to humans as well. But we've continued to use them for profit, right? And the lobby behind these agrochemical industries is huge. And
it is huge.
Their wallets are well padded. And so the battle here in Vermont has been unique, but, there's been a bill proposed a number of different times, and it hasn't passed the House or it hasn't passed the Senate, and it's been dead in the water. Although this year, I think the beekeepers reached a breaking point, and they said, you know what, like, we're going to drop all else, and we're going to organize, and we're going to organize, and we're going to organize, and we're going to make this happen. And a number of different scientists, community member advocates, and beekeepers all came together there was a group started called the Vermont Pollinator Working Group, which was one of the biggest catalysts in getting this bill passed. This had lawyers from the Conservation Law Foundation and people from Audubon, we bridged all these different organizations to work together on this issue. And we said, okay, who's going to testify when? Who's going to find somebody to back the bill? And we really compartmentalized all these different tasks and laid them out and made a plan. We also worked with beekeeper, which is Vermont Public Interest Research Group. And a lot of different states have public interest research groups. But this group was really key in, being the project manager and knowing the ins and outs of the legal system, especially in our state and our state house, and say, okay, you need to talk to this person about this issue, or you need to give this letter to this person in order for it to reach the right place. And having that person was key. That was really like the difference between the bills that have been brought to the House in the past and this one, which has ultimately passed. I'll say, we thought it was like 2 months ago, you would have asked us, and it's like, oh, we have so much support in the House, so much support in the Senate. We've done all this testimony. No problem. Everybody's going to vote this through. Totally tripartisan, right? When it comes down to it, the agrochemical industry put a lot of money behind it. Whether it was them or somebody else, it's a little unclear, and I think it's wishy-washy for a reason, intentionally, right? But there were a lot of farmers that came forward and said, like, this bill is going to hurt my bottom line, and the science says that it's not, right? That we do not need neonics to have an increased crop yield, whether it's corn or soy or whatever we use it. At least here in New England, it's just not necessary. And
when was the last time we saw that bug in Vermont, the corn?
Yeah, I mean, we talked to some dairy farmers, right? And it targets different insects, but it's like, the corn maggot, like less than 2% of our crop or less than 1% of our crop here in Vermont was ever affected by that insect in the first place. And here we are, like, decimating our ecological systems for what?
Tons of percent
increase in yields? No, it makes no sense. I mean, it's to line pockets and make profit. And so I will say, like, down to the end, the bill ultimately passed by one vote, but the governor vetoed it, which, was unexpected because it had full support in the House and the Senate. But he vetoed it, probably because of some pressure from an agricultural lobby. And we had to push hard. We had to, down to the last minute, call all of our representatives, say, we encourage you to override this veto because I'm a beekeeper, because I'm a scientist, and here are the facts. And people got on the phones, people wrote letters, and it made a difference. And ultimately, the override happened. And as of Monday of this week, this bill has become law. So this is a phase out of neonics that will take a number of years to totally wipe them off the seed coatings. But the hope is that these, this creates a market pressure to make seed without neonics available to New York and Vermont. They already have it available in Quebec, and hopefully neighboring states can then participate in that system as well.
Oh, I'm sure it's gonna be the start of a chain, because I was thinking about that yesterday when I read about the bill. I can't calculate the amount of value that's going to add to any agricultural product coming from Vermont. Vermont's going to be able to increase price of any agriculture. It's going to be unbeatable.
Yeah, it's a marketing point too, right? Because the reality is like this stuff is in our rain. It's so ubiquitous throughout our country that it's literally raining from the sky. And they're finding it in like the cerebral spinal fluid of babies. So if we could wipe this stuff out of our agricultural landscape, like at least here in this state, or maybe in New England, or, hopefully in the country someday, then that really provides like a marketable asset to that food product, right? It's like, this is real clean food that's healthy for you. And unfortunately, we've adulterated that in so many places. And it's like these farmers that are growing organic and getting rained on by neonicotinoids, it defeats the whole purpose of growing organic in the first place. Or like us with beekeeping, right? We're doing all organic practices and we're really intentional about the health and happiness of our bees, you know? And for them to go out and play in the park every day and be exposed to some toxic chemical and then come home, it's like, that's out of our control, but it feels awful. And it's something that we've been wanting to change for a long time. You know, we've banned one, and it's the most toxic right now that's being used, but there are others that we still need to fight. And I'm sure the agrochemical company is going to try to, you know, grant all these exemptions for different farmers to continue to use the seed. And they're going to try to find replacement product for a product that never needed in the first place. So like the fight is far from over, right? But it's in a really important first step to say that we can do it. And we need to keep doing it. And it raises awareness and starts this like daily conversation amongst the general public saying like, you know, bees are really in danger. And as a citizen, as a voting citizen, I can do something about it.
Yeah, congratulations for all the efforts from all the Vermont people there that get together and make that happen. I was completely impressed, and I'm following this more closely now because I want to propagate to other people how it's possible to, you know, how it's done, you know?
Yeah.
It is possible to do, and if you get the people together, I think the science is there. I already mentioned that many times, even though the great majority of the scientists we're not gonna speak about. I have just I sent 100 invitations for interviews, and I got like 2%. You know, that's the ratio. But there are some people that start to, you know, that not scared of the industry because a lot of the academic grants, you know, there are some money coming from the agrochemical industry. So the scientists are kind of scared, you know, if they don't have money, they don't have something to do or a lab or, you know, how to pay the bills for the lab. So that's why they're not going to talk too much. But I'm so glad, you know, that might motivate people. Okay, we're moving, we're changing. Maybe people is going to get into this boat and go to a new ride. So that's my hope here.
Yes. Yeah, it's my hope too, because the misinformation campaigns are real. The agrochemical company sets out to do what they need to do to continue to make their profits. You know, we saw letters coming from them, and yeah, I mean, we went to like a Champlain Valley Farmers Union meeting, and the Agency of Ag was there or represented there, and they were speaking about how important it was for farmers to stand up and advocate against this bill because it's going to affect their bottom line.
But this guy's supposed to work for the farmer.
Yeah, he works for the farmers, but this is how the lines get skewed, right? And working for the farmers becomes working for the chemical companies because they're the ones supplying the farmers and their profits. We have real issue with it.
Well, but you guys did it, and I hope this continue, my friends. So I want to ask you then, what's next for Champlain Valley Apiaries? So what do you see in the future? You're just starting now as a fourth generation, and you're dealing with all these political things, chemicals. So how you see this moving forward?
Yeah, so there's hope now, right? The last 20 years have been daunting, and I'm not saying it's any less daunting, but I'd like to say that there's more hope, that there's a chance for a future with healthy bees, right, and a healthy environment. And that's what we're ultimately striving for. It's like the farmers that are farming soil, right? We're farming healthy ecological systems to have bees. And that's what I'm in pursuit of doing more of, right? Like my great-grandfather, I'm really passionate about agricultural education. And I think that, you know, being in a farm family business gives me an interesting perspective and one that I'm keen on sharing with folks. So, you know, I've taught a number of different beekeeping workshops, but I'm also interested in general agricultural education. So, you know, Champlain Valley Apiaries, we're we've sold honey. Raw honey is our specialty product, and it's fabulous. It's never going to go away because we have a devoted following of people that eat it. But we're going to expand outside of that. I think we're going to teach a lot more workshops. We're eventually going to sell some bee equipment and have our own, education center where people can come and take different beekeeping workshops, as well as maple syrup, because that's something that Vermont is very famous for.
Yeah.
Et cetera. And like Umberto, you've been alluding to, we have a history with beekeeping in my family. And so we intend to start a beekeeping museum here in Vermont at some point, which will hopefully be a destination place for people that are, interested in learning more.
That's very exciting news, my friend. So a museum is coming. Do you have a timeline for that or something?
I'll release that in the next interview.
Okay, I'll be waiting to take notes here. Curtis, do you have any, before I wrap this up, do you have any other message to people how to find you? What if they want to know more about your operation and what you're doing or the bill, how they can contact you?
Yeah, so ChamplainValleyHoney.com. I am Curtis at ChamplainValleyHoney.com. We are Champlain Valley Apiaries. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm on TikTok now, which I don't love doing, but they said I got to do it. And then our doors are always open. We're, our business is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. And we love having visitors, people to stop in, whether it's just to get a jar of honey or to take a tour around the facility. So shoot me an email. Yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about our campaign and the bill we got passed here in Vermont, because, it benefits us all to have other states in pursuit of this as well.
That's true. I will leave all those links in the description of this video. And Curtis, I want to say thank you for your time, man. That was a great conversation. I enjoy very much, and I think the people at home will enjoy as well.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto. It was great to finally talk.
Fantastic. All right, thank you.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yes, let's do it.
All right.
Bye-bye.